Welcome back for another Mock Draft Monday. Joe DeLeone, Ryan Roberts. We're doing a first-round mock draft with trades. Let's get right into it. So we're not gonna waste any time. There's no analysis or any thoughts here. Cam Ward's go to the Titans. Anyone's got a problem with that? Take it up in the comments. No one is going to believe that Cam Ward is not going to the Titans. So Ryan, yes. I will start us off here with the Cleveland Browns at the second overall pick. I think that the news of them signing Joe Flacco is not telling in the sense that they think Joe Flacco solves all of their problems, but bringing him back kind of feels as though that they are satisfied or not satisfied, but would rather try to go with the current room than drafting Shedeur Sanders. So I am going to take Travis Hunter, the wide receiver cornerback from Colorado, Shedeur Sanders' teammate, giving them a second option alongside Jerry Jeudy and also a premier starting outside cornerback. I think that this, if they don't go quarterback, this would be a strong move for them instead of what I would love to do, Abdul Carter being the edge rusher opposite of Myles Garrett.
Yeah, I mean, with the predictive nature, I think it makes a lot of sense. That this Travis Hunter to the Browns conversation has also gotten a lot stronger over the last couple weeks because Cleveland did have the 32nd ranked offense in the NFL, and I guess the thought is to add Travis Hunter and play wide receiver immediately and potentially upgrade that room. I mean, Kenny Pickett's not a great quarterback. Joe Flacco's a stopgap, but your hope is with Jerry Jeudy, with Travis Hunter, you can get a little something going, hopefully, in Cleveland. New York Giants. Guys on the hot seat, obviously. Brian Daboll at head coach, general manager Joe Shane. They need a big season, Joe, so I think best player available is still the conversation to go to. I understand that on paper, people will look at it and say, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. That's not a bad defensive end group, but we have heard now increased conversations about potentially moving Kayvon at some point. So I am going to the best player available, and that is Abdul Carter, the edge out of Penn State. I understand that you could say there's better needs on the table, there's bigger needs on the table, but ultimately, this is not a great roster. And anytime you're not a great roster, I think that you are sacrificing opportunity if you just draft for need. I want to draft best player available, and that is Abdul Carter.
That would kind of be a hellish situation for the Giants where if they are not sold on Shedeur Sanders, it seemed like they really liked Cam Ward, and they obviously are not going to be able to get him here at pick 3. Them not getting Travis Hunter and then forcing themselves into this spot of, I guess we have to take another edge rusher and then try and move Kayvon Thibodeau. So that would be a really, really awkward spot for them of just jumping right back into a position that's not their biggest weakness, but the best player available. I can't complain being a Giants fan if we ended up picking Abdul Carter. Patriots, here we are where they can go best available, but I feel like that their strongest need or their biggest need is protecting Drake May and finding protection for him.
Sure.
Now, one would think that Will Campbell would be the first offensive lineman off the board, but it feels like at the current moment that there's a lot of momentum for Armand Membu, the offensive lineman from Missouri, who could play guard or he could play tackle on either tackle spot for the Patriots. The athleticism is going to be coveted by NFL teams, and we always see these tackles or guards that test really well at the combine tend to be really, really big risers throughout the process. So I'm going to go with Armand Membu as a New England Patriot.
It's such an interesting pick because obviously if that one does happen, Membu's probably at least getting a shot to play left tackle, which he hasn't done in his career. Feels very... And it's not a perfect comparison because J.C. Latham did play some left tackle at Alabama, but I thought most people thought that Latham was probably a better right tackle or guard potentially on the NFL level, but yet he had to give it a shot as a rookie, even though it looks like he's moving over to right tackle as a sophomore in 2025. But yes, interesting selection. Let's go 5, Jacksonville Jaguars. The most boring pick of all time, and that's fine. Boring is not always a bad thing. We're going Mason Graham.
Tyler Warren.
I actually like... If I picked somebody else other than Mason Graham, it probably would be Tyler Warren. As crazy as that is to say, but I'm going to draft Mason Graham. I've talked about this one a ton, Joe. That defensive line has a lot of talent. That defense has talent. The whole team has talent, but they need some attitude, man. They need a guy that plays with a little bit of just angst and aggressiveness. I need a player like a Mason Graham to set a tone on that interior.
So I feel like the really common pick here for the Raiders in these last couple of weeks before the draft is Ashton Jeanty ends up becoming a Las Vegas Raider. I almost feel like they've been a little too open about this. I think that if Will Campbell's on the board here at pick 6, that there will be strong consideration to go offensive line. Their offensive line's not putrid. It's not completely awful, but they need a boost. And if you're trying to support Geno Smith and have a better foundation for whatever ends up being the quarterback direction in the next 3 years, you got to start accumulating offensive line picks. So I'm going to take Will Campbell, and he's another one of these offensive linemen that we've discussed as flexibility, who could start left tackle, right tackle, maybe he bumps inside. That flexibility is something that would be desired by a team like the Raiders that don't really have true full certainty at who their full starting offensive line is going to be for the next few years.
I think at pick 7, this is a sneaky Shedeur Sanders spot, potentially. You have Justin Fields on a 2-year contract, but it's only 2 years and $40 million. So it's not like you broke the bank to make him your franchise quarterback. This is a little bit in an evaluation period. But I do think if you're going to make it work with Justin Fields, putting increased amount of pass catchers and protection around him, which means that an offensive lineman might be in the conversation, but you just drafted Will Campbell 1 pick in front of me, so I am going to take Tyler Warren. And another pick that I've liked a lot in the past. They haven't had a dynamic pass-catching weapon at the tight end position in a very, very long time. I know it's been a mixed bag at first-round tight end over the years with the New York Jets, talking about Dustin Keller, and before that, Kyle Brady. But I do think that Tyler Warren is a top 5 overall player in this class, not injecting positional value. And I think that they need some talented playmakers around a Garrett Wilson and a Breece Hall at running back.
I was trying to cook up in my head like what would be an unexpected move for the Panthers here, but them not taking the second edge off the board would feel like me trying to do too much. As much as I like Will Johnson, I don't think that Johnson's going to go that early. I'm going to keep going where I
know who it's going to be, Joe. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you who it's going to be.
Who's it going to be?
I think it's between Jalen Walker and Jahad Campbell. I think they're going to take one of those linebackers.
You know what? Let's be chaotic here. Let's go Jahad Campbell.
Okay.
Let's end up going with the athleticism and also the usage where he can be not as a pass rusher, but a former edge recruit that can be used as an aggressive blitzer that you attack downhill with. He is a bullet that you can just fire at opposing offenses. So that's the earliest we've seen Jahad Campbell I can think of in a mock draft. And I think that creates a really interesting domino for the rest of this first round. So let's go with Jahad Campbell to the Panthers.
The New Orleans Saints are in an interesting conversation because the quarterback debate will continue to go forward with the Derek Carr injury and the availability. You have Spencer Rattler as somewhat of insurance, at least a younger guy that has some promise, some talent to work with. And a lot of people are just kind of penciling in a quarterback, Joe, but we've already seen some insiders post, about like a Jackson Dart, for instance, that he's a guy that they prefer in the second round. He's not really a first round conversation of a quarterback. Shedeur Sanders, though, is on the board. So that's where it makes things a little bit interesting. I'm ultimately going to go for a different need for them. And they need some help on the pass rush. Cam Jordan's getting super old. They need a couple guys to be able to help that unit just overall. It's between Shamar Stewart and Jalen Walker for me, which is a very unique conversation because they're both so different. One's a stand-up rusher, obviously out of the Georgia Bulldog program. The other, big, physical, high upside kid that the production has not quite backed it up yet. I am going to go just based upon what they typically have liked on the edge. I know it's a new regime, but just historically what the Saints have liked, even going back to the Charles Grant days, they like size on the edge. So I'm going to go with Shamar Stewart, pick 9, Texas A&M edge to the New Orleans Saints.
All right, let's create our first trade here. To peel back the curtain, we had talked a little bit about this, that if we thought Shedeur was going to be on the board at pick 10, we were going to try and make a trade happen. So if Shedeur makes it this far, there's one team that is the clearest that needs to trade up, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're assuming at this point, we're 2 weeks away from the draft. Aaron Rodgers is not signed yet. It would be horrendous if Aaron Rodgers signs by the time this video is posted, and I'm gonna put my head through a wall if that happens. I probably just jinxed us. But I would think that the Steelers, if they didn't have to move up to a crazy high pick and they only had to move up to 10, that would be survivable. How do I pick the team? Oh, here we go. Okay, so the team that is going to trade up. By the way, this mock draft simulator, mockdraftcentral.io, is arguably the best simulator that's out there. What do you think?
Yeah.
What else besides pick 21 next year's first?
Yeah, you would have to. I mean, you're moving up 11 spots, right? So next year's first, this year's first. See if they accept that.
It says that all trades will be accepted, so it's not gonna crap on us. So why don't we do pick the third round pick as well, just to kind of make this realistic. We're moving up 11. No. Wait, we're moving up 11 spots. Is that too much to give up a first and a third?
First and a third is not too much. If I can, though, can we also get back if we are the? Actually, I'm overthinking it. I think a little bit now. I was going to say, can we get a fourth in return to kind of supplement the third? You understand what I'm saying? Just a little bit down in value.
Oh, is 123 even a third round pick?
That's a fourth round pick.
The fourth round pick. So why don't we? I think a first and a fourth is not too much capital being given up. If I recall correctly, when the Bears traded up to draft Justin Fields, that was a first and a third, I believe.
Yes, that makes sense.
The Giants. Okay, so let's go with that. Let's do it. So they benefit from the ability to trade back. And then Shedeur Sanders is a Pittsburgh Steeler. And hopefully this works better than Kenny Pickett. We can all hope. If you're a Steelers fan, let's hope that comes to fruition.
And the Chicago Bears are definitely in the wavelength of trading back, I would think, in this class, because they don't have a ton of needs at pick 10. So I think they can invest in moving back a little bit and getting a little bit more capital potentially. The San Francisco 49ers, give me Jalen Walker, the outside pass rush linebacker out of Georgia. Predictive nature, Joe. And this is a young man that I think has pass rush tools, but needs a little bit of coaching. And who better to help coach him up than on the other side of him, you have good old Nick Bosa to be able to help him develop his bag a little bit deeper and become a dynamic stand-up rusher who can also do some things on the second level.
I think Jerry Jones would be completely geeking out if Ashton Jeanty was still here on the board. So I'm not even going to think this way. I feel a normal individual would think that it's Ted McMillan or it's Ashton Jeanty, and maybe if both those guys are off the board, maybe they go Matthew Golden. The realist in me thinks that Jerry Jones is going to take someone insanely ridiculous that nobody would be predicting or guessing. But I'm gonna go with Jeanty, knowing the history of Jerry's willingness to draft elite running backs and to have him in the mix behind an underrated offensive line, I think would take them a huge step further.
Yep, that is the dream scenario for Dallas. At 13, this is not the dream scenario for Miami because both the top offensive linemen are off the board, and Membu and Will Campbell. I'm going to give you a little bit of a curveball here, Joe, and one that I don't think is an unrealistic curveball. I am going to give them Malachi Starks, safety from Georgia. Ooh. They lost Javon Holland this offseason. They do not have a playmaker on the back end now. It was just very recent into the past that the Miami Dolphins had one of the more talented secondaries in the entire National Football League. That is different nowadays, but Malachi Starks brings a playmaking presence on the back end and one that is left by the vacated Javon Holland, who left this offseason.
We posted a clip about Tyler Booker the other day, and I was in love with the fact that so many Colts fans were geeked up about just the presence and the thought of Tyler Booker being an Indianapolis Colt. And right now, my big theme with the Colts is Anthony Richardson just needs help around him. You're giving him one more realistic shot if he wins the starting job against Daniel Jones, which he should. You either look for a guard because you lost Will Fries and Ryan Kelly in free agency, or you try to get another weapon and maybe you take Colston Loveland here. But I'm going to go with Tyler Booker. I think that he is the steadiest offensive line prospect in this class, and he is going to be so strong for them, having a really more well-rounded unit and reliability in the middle.
That is such a weird board for the Colts because the three players that are probably the most likely to them in that slot are Tyler Warren, Malachi Starks, and Jahad Campbell, and they are all off the
all
board.
Gone.
14, yeah. Not a great situation.
Go with the safe
15, option.
Yeah.
15 on the board here. Pass rush is a huge need, both interior and on the edge.
Well, can I interject before you jump in? I say that you don't take an edge rusher because is it just me that feels like no matter the fact that they need an edge, that they're just not going to take one because the Atlanta Falcons refuse to address their biggest need every single draft?
It's not. Yeah, they're a little bit of a weird team drafting wise. They are a little bit, but I would say, Joe, they were a historically awful pass rush team last year. Like they need somebody, whether if it's not an edge, it's somebody on the interior. And that's actually where I'm going to go. This is a little bit of I guess a wild card to some, but I think it's absolutely can happen. I'm going to take Derek Harmon, the interior defensive lineman out of Oregon. I understand, and I saw you hovering over Kenneth Grant. It would make a lot of sense, but Kenneth Grant is not the pass rusher on the interior. He's more stop the run, upside as a pass rusher, as a 330-plus pounder. Derek Harmon is more of the versatile movement piece that gets a lot of interior pressure. So Derek Harmon to the Atlanta Falcons at 15.
So this past year, the Cardinals defense had a nice run where they were one of the more underrated defenses in the NFL, kind of came to full head that they were lacking true talent. So the way that you take a step forward this year is by drafting a blue chipper like Will Johnson. His slide is going to be one of the weirdest things that happened on draft night. And we're going to be talking about in 4 years from now, like why the hell did Will Johnson fall as far as he did? But you could have a future all-pro caliber corner in Johnson with his instincts, his length, and his just overall play style.
Yeah, that one makes a lot of sense. I actually do think this is a reasonable range for Will Johnson, too, just based upon some overthink and obviously him coming off the injury. But it's going to be interesting to see what it ultimately looks like. Bengals have to draft defense. Like, there's no doubt about it. First-year defense coordinator now, Al Golden. You have holes on the first, second, and third level of the defense. So literally best player available could be a conversation point here. Joe, I am going to take, and again, I don't love this player, but I do think at this point in the draft, it makes some sense at pick 17. I also think the Bengals could be open for business potentially to move back, but we're not going to do it right now on the fly. Mykel Williams, outside pass rusher, Cincinnati Bengals. There's still some questions over Trey Hendrickson and his long-term with the Bengals. Even if he does come back and is the ferocious pass rusher we have seen, he still could use a partner in crime, and Mykel Williams brings a very different style of a game, which I think could be an interesting just contrast of styles.
So now what's, by the way, crazy, Ted McMillan is still on the board here at 18. And I think that, by the way, this is a more realistic world of occurring than people realize. I don't think that there's going to be such a rush to the podium to draft any of these receivers. But the Seahawks have an opportunity to go at receiver, to have somebody to play alongside Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp. I feel like based on the builds and the frames of those guys, Ted McMillan doesn't make a lot of sense. So you might want to go with somebody speedier. Do they want to round out their offensive line to have better protection for Sam Darnold?
Wide receiver is interesting. I will say this, though. They have a hole at right tackle. They have a hole inside at offensive line, interior offensive line.
I'm going to go Kelvin Banks. I'm just going to go Kelvin Banks. I think that with all those picks that they have, that they can come back around in the second round and the third round and maybe draft a receiver and see what they can get there. But I'm going to go Kelvin Banks. Drafting offensive line seems to make a lot of sense.
It does. It really does make a lot of sense. At 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I know some people might be screaming from the rafters about Mike Green from Marshall, the pass rusher, but I will say this. I do not think that is a fit that is going to make sense based on just some things that I know and some things I have heard. So I'm going to go either outside corner or pass rusher. I think it's interesting with James Pierce Jr. there. Jahdae Barron, I think, makes a lot of sense out of Texas. I actually think Barron could end up going a little bit earlier than this. So I will go Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas. I still prefer him inside, but I do think in the space game that we've seen in the NFL now, the separation between inside and outside corner, as far as playing in the nickel or playing on the outside, I think that it's becoming a little bit smaller at this point. And I think a guy that can play a little bit inside and out is valuable. So Barron fits into that Tampa Bay defense.
So right now I am conflicted with the Broncos being able to get Colston Loveland without having to move, or do they draft Ted McMillan? Now they already have Cortland Sutton, who we know is a big body catch point guy. We know that Sean Payton likes bigger receivers, and he loves the whole big slot thing, but I don't totally know if that's what I want to deploy Ted McMillan to do, because he's not like the smoothest, most efficient route runner in the world. I'm going to go with Colston Loveland. They need a dynamic weapon at tight end, and they haven't had that. We know that Peyton loves
Evan Ingram.
Okay, well, I think that we can. I don't understand. You brought this up, and other people keep bringing this up. Like, I don't really think that Evan Ingram prevents them from finding their future tight end. I don't know. I think Evan Ingram's a good player, but that's somebody who shouldn't stop them from drafting Colston Loveland in the first round to be their primary tight end.
It's fair. It's fair. Chicago Bears, Mike Green, James Pierce Jr. are staring at me in the face, pass rusher from Marshall and pass rusher from Tennessee, respectively. Joe, if it was me, I would draft James Pierce Jr., but we have a predictive nature to this mock, So I'm going to take at 21 overall, the Chicago Bears. They're going to draft Mike Green, the edge out of Marshall. He is not the every down player of a couple of the other edge players due to just lack of play strength in the run game and shorter wingspan, ability to lock out at the point of attack. But he is a very high-end pass rusher, really explosive first step. He has tools in his arsenal, so immediate pass rush boost for the Chicago Bears at 21.
All right, if Ted McMillan's here on the board at pick 22 for the Chargers, I think that is going to end up being their selection. We already had, and it's kind of funny to consider, we already had them fail with a different style catch point guy in Quentin Johnston, who hasn't really lived up to that first-round expectation. He's been a decent, what will go on to be like a third option in an offense. But I think if you bring Ted McMillan in here, you get another reset there, another opportunity to see, hey, can this mesh well? Can this work with Justin Herbert being his go-to jump ball target? So I'm going to go with Ted McMillan with the Chargers.
Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan, will be going to the Green Bay Packers at pick 23. Okay. They have a very good three technique still in Kenny Clark. They do not have an interior defensive lineman that is an imposing presence at nose tackle like a Kenneth Grant. He will allow guys like Kenny Clark to be able to one gap and be penetration players, but he will also allow guys behind him like Edgerrin Cooper at linebacker to be able to run free. So Kenneth Grant, I just combined Kenny Clark and actually Kenny Clark's name would be Kenneth, right? But either way, Kenneth Grant, yes. Imposing presence on the interior for the Green Bay Packers.
So I'm thinking here, I know that defensive tackle is somewhat of a need for this Vikings team. I feel like corner has been a really consistently projected pick. I'm going to take Maxwell Hairston for the Vikings. They could use some speed on the outside. I think that anyone who doesn't like this pick, I implore you to go back and look at his tape. We found out when we were at the combine that he was dealing with some sort of an infection during the year, and that kind of impacted why he wasn't playing at his normal playing weight. His play strength wasn't as good. He wasn't as good of a tackler. And when you watch his tape, a lot of that makes sense. I think Harrison's a player whose speed will end up translating to the league as he regains some of that weight that he lost during the season.
This is the easiest selection of the draft. The Houston Texans did not have to move up to make sure they stopped the offensive line run because unfortunately for himself, Josh Simmons has continued to fall down the board. This is the cleanest projection as a starting left tackle in the NFL, in my opinion, in the 2025 class. They got Cam Robinson in as a stopgap, which is fine because Josh Simmons is still coming off the injury. Who knows exactly what 100% of the recovery timeline will be. But when he is healthy, this is the starting left tackle for the Houston Texans, Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, former San Diego State transfer.
So it's very common to project a corner to go to the Rams, but there's not really any corners on the board that I'm in love with.
Yes, there is.
Well, do you really think that Ravel is going to go in the first round?
He's a borderline late first, early second round pick. Yeah, it's possible.
I just think because of the injury, he's going to knock him out. Yeah, Azariah Thomas is. Maybe I'll go with Thomas. I'm also...
Here's a little bit of a weird one. Can I give you a weird one?
Okay, go ahead.
It's not weird. Weird is not the right word. You have now Puka Nacua, who plays a lot on the outside. You have now Devontae Adams, who plays almost exclusively on the outside. But you do not have a guy that fits tremendously into the Cooper Kupp role in this offense. This is making a strength a bigger strength, but having a guy like a Luther Burden or an Emeka Egbuka.
So that was where my head was going. Is that they would take a receiver. I saw Matthew Golden's name here, but he's not really a fit for them already having Nacua and Devontae Adams. So I'm going to go through Luther Burden because I think Sean McVay is the type of a coach and a play caller that is going to try and be as creative as possible with using him and maximizing him. If he ends up with the Rams, that is nightmare scenario for the NFL because that would be the best possible spot for him to turn out to have a really productive and successful career.
Yeah, that's a great spot for him. James Pierce Jr. finally comes off the board to the Baltimore Ravens at pick 27. What do we always joke about, Joe? Whether it was Ozzie Newsome or now Eric DeCosta, they typically just let good players fall to them. Now, James Pierce Jr. dealing with a lot of the off-the-field maturity stuff we've continued to hear about, which there's validity, obviously, to some of that stuff. But they are a franchise that have such an infrastructure that I'm not as worried about him going in there and having a relapse or having a situation where he just doesn't do what he is, the expectations that are put upon him. So dynamic pass rusher, if he is squeaky clean off the field and he has his head on straight, this could end up being a top 10 overall player in this class. He has that type of upside to him, and the Ravens take the gamble there at pick 27.
I am not in love with the Lions' interior defensive line room. I think that they need a guy that is going to cause headaches to help free up Aiden Hutchinson. I love this idea of Tyleik Williams becoming a Detroit Lion. He just feels like a Lion to me with the physicality, the power that he plays with. So we're going to throw him in there in the middle of that defense. Wow, Matthew Golden still sliding. I wonder, but maybe this is where he goes. Maybe he could end up on the Commanders.
Emeka Egbuka is coming to the Washington Commanders here, Joseph. He is coming here. One, I know this is controversial to some. I personally do like Emeka more than Matthew Golden. Two, I do think that there are several teams that believe that to be the case as well. There's definitely some that prefer Matthew Golden in that conversation. Not sure which way on the line Washington straddles. But I do believe that combining him with Terry McLaurin with an improved offensive line after getting Laramie Tunsil, Jaden Daniels adds another really impressive weapon to his arsenal to work with. And I think Egbuka is a very clean fit into the slot for Washington.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Okay.
The Bills don't have a lot of glaring needs. Corner is one of them.
Second corner, interior defensive line.
Right. Okay. So I'm kind of looking here at that Nick Emenwari is still on the board. And I'm here's my thought process. They've Taylor Rapp at strong safety and they have DeMar Hamlin at free safety. I think we can both agree that DeMar Hamlin's not exactly a long-term starting solution at free safety, but Nick Emenwari is not exactly a free safety. So I'm going to go with Emenwari. The fact that they don't have to move or do anything and they end up with maybe the best safety prospect in this class, and then you just have just a general defensive weapon, I think that would be a nutty move for the Bills to be able to play with him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they had some injuries in that room. Taylor Rapp down the stretch of the season as well, and they just I know they drafted Cole Bishop last year out of Utah, which they like a decent amount, but I do think that they could continue to invest into that room. And Nick Emenwari at pick 30, I think makes a lot of sense from a value perspective. Kansas City, I am conflicted here, Joe. So I'm looking at Matthew Golden staring at me in the face, but I'm also in my mind saying they need a left tackle desperately, man, like so desperately. It is an absurd level. So my question is here, Josh Connerly is a guy that definitely is on the radar there. My other question, though, is that there are some NFL teams that view Donovan Jackson as an offensive tackle. There are some. Right? I know, but even Dane Brugler and his beast had Donovan Jackson listed as a tackle because apparently there's a lot of tackle love in the NFL for a Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State. And here's why I'm conflicted here is that in theory, Connerly's the easier fit. But if Connerly doesn't work out at left tackle, can he really play guard? I mean, like ideally, probably not. He's not like the powerful, just impressive. He's not the dominant presence on the interior as a run blocker that I would want. Donovan Jackson, if he fails to tackle, he can at least move inside the left guard to help you stabilize your Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and then Donovan Jackson interior, which I think is pretty impressive, right? So I think I just talked myself into talking out loud. Donovan Jackson, Ohio State, drafted as an offensive tackle to compete at offensive tackle, but at worst, he's a guy that can stabilize the interior. So he has a little bit of a higher floor, I think, than a Josh Connerly.
So there's two guys here to wrap us up with the Eagles that have my attention. One being Donovan Ezeraku, who they already have a well-rounded defensive line unit, so it gives them the luxury of being able to pick a designated pass rusher. I don't think Ezeraku is a good run defender. So I don't think that
loves Ezeraku. I feel like he's going to go in the first round. Yeah.
But can I ask you this? I need help figuring this one out.
Yes.
Receiver's been a projected need for them by some. We already have AJ Brown. We already have Devonta Smith. I'm not correct. The Matthew Golden doesn't feel like a fit in that receiver room, right?
I think he could be a fit if you wanted him to be a fit. I just don't know if it's first round need for the Philadelphia Eagles because again, you have two studs, 1,000-yard receivers, and then I understand that your third receiver you only have a Jahan Dotson and you just signed like a Terrace Marshall, but are you really going to draft a wide receiver 3 at pick 32? You understand what I'm saying there? I don't know. I do think that there are bigger needs, and I think Matthew Golden has a chance to go in the first round, just kind of on a redraft perspective. But also, just everything I'm hearing, I wouldn't be shocked if Ezeraku ends up going top 20. So if we're being more predictive, I think he is the more predictive player to end in round 1.
Donovan Ezraku goes to the Eagles. Folks, let us know how you feel about our first round mock draft. Hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll talk to you later.